the first book that I actually grabbed this from Vinny's library. He's the book that I wanted to share is this John Devola book,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a photographer. I think he's based in Southern California, and this book is actually, I think it was printed in Japan in conjunction with a show that he did with a gallery out there. Um, the back, it just says gallery and studio. Um, so maybe that was like the space that published the book. But I chose this book because I've been spending, I think I mentioned, I've been spending so much time inside, as we all are right now in quarantine, and been trying to go on walks pretty regularly, but have been sort of falling off recently. And I just went out yesterday for the first time in a while. And every time I do go out, like with Vinny or whoever, I feel like everything is so visually stimulating in this way because I'm so used to like looking on the computer or just um, sort of like not having every sense stimulated like normal. And so going outside, everything looks just like so beautiful or like saturated in color. And I really do feel like these photos are so sort of like capture that feeling in a way. Um, and I think this book mostly, I'll just show you like an example of what I'm talking about, but this book is like, it covers a lot of his, I think these are from a series that he did in this part of Southern California called, or this part of Malibu called Zuma, on Zuma Beach, where he went to this abandoned house and like photographed the sunset through the windows, but also like altered the house over time by like spray painting the walls and stuff. And the book itself is just really stunning. It's really beautifully printed, and the images are really gorgeous to begin with, but the way they're reproduced is also like really captivating too. So I love this book as an object, and I got this for Vinny for his birthday last year, but it's one of my favorite books that he owns. He has a lot of photo books. Here's another image of the house, like burned, like a more burned interior. But it is this cool, like, you have like the interior space and then you have the sunset, which is like constantly changing. And I think that he did this project over, like he didn't take all these photos at one time. I think he like frequently revisited this house, this abandoned house. But it's also
Is it
cool
is it
because
all from the same house, or is it all different abandoned houses?
I think it's from the same house, but I could be wrong. But it looks like it could be. Like I think I don't really know too much about him or his photos in general or this project, but I think they are from like the same place that he would frequently go back to. And I don't think it's there anymore. I don't know. I don't, but it is really cool to think about like this burnt out abandoned house in an area that's like really wealthy and just like so visually beautiful. And I don't know, you sort of see like the decay in that too by looking at these photos. But even in the decay, it's still like really gorgeous or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess I'll go on to the next book that I grabbed. The next one is Stone Butch Blues by Leslie Feinberg. Are you familiar with this one?
No,
It's
not at
it's a
all.
really amazing book. It's like very accessible, and Leslie Feinberg was like a major transgender activist, and this book is I think it's like biographical fiction. So it is like a work of fiction, but I think it's based on their actual experience. And they were born in the 1950s and grew up um, in Buffalo. And the book sort of like chronicles this person's life in a time when there wasn't really like language or an open community for um, people who were transgender or like um, queer. And so it's interesting. You get sort of like this insight into um, this person's life story and like the changing politics of like queer culture. And it's not only like a story about this person's life, but it also sort of like covers I mean, it's about like gender and sexuality, of course, but it's also about like union organizing and class. Like this person grew up in a very like blue collar working class environment and presented as like a butch lesbian for a long time, and joined a lot of like factory or like worked at a lot of factory jobs because um, that's where they could present um, themselves in like a masculine way and be in a work environment where they wouldn't be where that would be acceptable. And their story also like goes a lot into like um, trying to union organize, because with the security of joining a union, they wouldn't be able to be laid off for like work discrimination. So it is really interesting to think about um, like where this person fits in, not only within their own like queer community, but also in terms of like their class struggle and what that was like, and also like police brutality and race politics and just like general social codes that would exist within their community, like in their subculture as like a butch lesbian, and how that has like changed historically over time. And how because they were a butch and eventually transitioned, um, they were like not necessarily like accepted within the lesbian community. Um, but later just sort of like and sort of had to navigate that, and like later was able to like find themselves, I guess, like by just being comfortable with themselves and their own fluidity, like gender fluidity. So it's a really powerful book. And
What year is the book? What year was the book released? You know?
this book was written in, I think, the 90s. Let me see. 93.
Okay.
Yeah. And I
Cool.
got it from this place that I go to a lot actually in San Francisco, called Magazine, which is a used magazine store in a part of San Francisco called the Tenderloin, which you've
Yeah,
used to
yeah,
live
yeah.
in
Of
San
course.
Francisco,
Yeah.
you know. Have you ever been to that place?
I don't think so. I might
Oh,
have
okay.
actually, but I'm not. I don't remember the name magazine.
It's a really special place. It's been there for a long time and is owned by this queer couple or this gay couple who I think started the business in like the 1960s. And it's all used magazines, but then they're all like organized by um, like subject matter and title. But then you also there's like a really amazing like porn section and like an erotica, like erotic fiction section. And I think that like back when San Francisco was more of like a gay city, like people would probably go there. And I'm sure it was like a huge staple within the gay community there. But now, because of like housing instability, I think that they actually have secured their place in that neighborhood because they ended up turning the building into like a historical.
Oh,
I think
nice.
I forget what they did exactly, but now it's like it's some kind of foundation and So I think they have like a secure footing in the neighborhood and are there indefinitely, which is great. And
What
it's also
other
like, oh, go ahead.
what other bookstores do you like to go and purchase books? Even the first book you said you bought it for Vinny. What other
Yeah,
bookstores do you like to go, either San Francisco or in LA?
yeah. Um, I visit a lot of used bookstores because I am always looking for collage material from
Yeah, of course.
places that where I can like find recycled materials from. And it's also a cool way for me to like get to know different parts of the city that I wouldn't normally be visiting. So in San Francisco, there's Adobe Books, which is such a classic, and it's located in the Mission. And they've been there for a long time. It's a used bookstore. There's also, I think it's called Alley Cat Books, which is also in the Mission that
Yeah.
I like a lot. They have a lot of really good like political books and art books there. I love Moe's Books in Berkeley. They have an amazing um, antiquated and rare books section on the top floor. And I'm trying to think. In LA, there's, oh my God, I'm forgetting the name of it now. Wait, there's like the Last Bookstore, which is a really famous bookstore in downtown.
Hmm.
But it's kind of stressful. It's like there's a lot of tourists that go there, so I don't really go there that much. Um, this one that I'm thinking of is in Burbank, and it's called the Iliad. It's really cool. They have an amazing like subculture section. It's not the place you go with a specific book that you want to find in mind. It's more of a place that you like will have to devote a whole day to
Yeah.
going there because there's just like so much weird, cool stuff to look at. It's super dusty too. So if you have allergies,
Cool.
it's like good to wear.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are, and then when I'm in New York, I love going to Strand
Yeah.
just because it's such a New York staple. And I always find stuff there that I like, that I find interesting, that I feel like I wouldn't normally find in other places or just by like ordering books online or something.
I love that. Strand is kind of everyone mentioned the Strand. Everyone that
Yeah.
we interviewed so
Oh,
far.
really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
impossible not to. Like
Yeah.
there is no one specific kind of books that you can't find, basically.
Yeah.
Whatever books you're into, you'll find it there.
Yeah, definitely. Um, do you know if their business is struggling right
I
now,
don't
or do you
know
think they're okay?
actually.
Oh,
I
okay, yeah.
don't know. I know that they were having some weird trouble because for what I understand, I don't remember now too in depth, but they wanted to turn them into a landmark, but
Oh,
the
cool.
owner was somehow contrary, was against it for some reason, because
Mm.
it kind of was making it so that then it was going to be more expensive to keep it up for some technical reason that I didn't really
Oh, okay.
understand.
Oh, okay, okay. I read somewhere that City Lights may not survive in
Oh,
San
really?
Francisco, which is such
Wow.
a tragedy if that place
Yeah.
actually does close down. But
Wow.
we'll see.
Did you have any other books you wanted to show?
Yeah, the last book that I wanted to share is this Cookie Mueller book, which is called Walking Through Clear. I always forget the title actually. Walking Through Clear Water in a Pool Painted Black. And it's a collection of short stories. And I love Cookie Mueller's. I guess I should say Cookie Mueller was like a big countercultural figure, like in the 80s, I guess,
Hmm.
70s and 80s. She was like in a lot of John Waters movies and was in a lot of like Nan Golden photos. Like she was part of that whole scene. And but also was like an amazing writer. And I think it's kind of hard to find some of the, like maybe she's having sort of like a resurgence now, but it's kind of hard to find some of her books. And this one in particular I love because there's like one of the last short stories is this she like published a letter that one of her friends wrote while he was in the hospital dying from AIDS related causes. And I've been thinking about the AIDS epidemic a lot, actually. I watched for the first time um, How to Survive a Plague, which is this amazing
Mm.
documentary on ACT UP. And they recently talked about it in that podcast, Still Processing. You can get
Mhm.
a sense of like my media intake, I guess, through this train of thought. But yeah, it's interesting. Like that book, I think, or that movie, they sort of talk about like how that, uh, or I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. But the movie in the podcast, they're saying that like it's such a blueprint for how to protest, and it feels really relevant to this moment that we're in. And this letter is just so touching. I guess I should, can I read it to you?
Yeah,
Just really
please,
briefly.
please.
Okay. Um, it's like page 147. It's called The Last Letter, 1989. Um, it's like wartime now, my aunt told me a few weeks ago. She lived in France during World War II. You young people are losing friends and relatives just as if it were bullets taking them away. She's right, it's a war zone, but it's a different battlefield. It's not bullets that catch these soldiers, and there's no bombs and no gunfire. These people are dying in a whisper. In 1982, my best friend died of AIDS. Since then, there have been so many more friends I've lost. We all have. Though all of this, I have come to realize that the most painful tragedy concerning AIDS death has to do with something much larger than the loss of human life itself. There is a deepening horror more grand than the world is yet aware. To see it, we have to watch closely who is being stolen from us. Perhaps there is no hope left for the whole of humankind, not because of the nature of the epidemic, but the nature of those it strikes. Each friend I've lost was an extraordinary person, not just to me, but to hundreds of people who knew their work and their fight. These were the kind of people who lifted the quality of all our lives. Their war was against ignorance, the bankruptcy of beauty, and the truancy of culture. They were people who hated and scorned pettiness, intolerance, bigotry, mediocrity, ugliness, and spiritual myopia. The blindness that makes life hollow and insipid was unacceptable. They tried to make us see. All of these friends were connected to the arts. Time and history have proven that the sensitive souls among us have always been more vulnerable. And it continues to go on, but it just feels like a really powerful. I actually like quoted this last summer. I did like a opioid. I did a talk on the opioid crisis and its effect on like a creative community at the San Francisco Art Book Fair, and also like included that writing. And yeah, I feel like it's something that has been sort of like coming up for me a lot recently in terms of like who the most vulnerable people are in these moments of crisis, and
It feels
and
so
like
relevant to now.
yeah, yeah, I mean, we
So
think about
relevant.
like I don't know, yeah, it's just interesting. Like it's like we are in a pandemic, and the pandemic is hurting so many people, but also it's like the true thing that is like causing the most despair in on like a global scale is like capitalism. And like
Yeah.
not to oversimplify it, but it's just like bringing to light what systems are truly failing us, I think. And it's the same story. It's always the same story, time and time
Yeah,
again.
it's really, I agree. It's really dismal. But that's where I see also the direct connections to what you just read. They're like, first of all, on one end, it's like, yeah, of course, and they still haven't found a quote unquote vaccine
Mm-hmm.
for AIDS, just because if affected mostly like a group of people that they didn't care for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And so to
Yeah,
them is like that's not the mainstream. They will find a vaccine for COVID because it affects everyone. And so they have to
right.
like rush into it. But
Yeah.
So AIDS, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter, even though like people constant daily were dying and are still dying.
Yeah.
And then on the
Yeah.
other end, the fact that like obviously the most vulnerable, which support the entire economy on their shoulders, are the ones that are forced to be in the street or are
Right.
forced to not be able to pay for living when they're at home. And it's just,
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's like, it's really sad. I mean, um, yeah, I mean, I feel like so many of these fatalities could have been avoided if we had like a social order in place that put people over profit,
yeah,
but
considering
we don't live
especially,
in that world.
yeah, considering
That
especially that we live in the what really like in the very proud to be most powerful economy in the fucking world, and we
yeah,
still aren't able to like cover healthcare for majority of people. And like
yeah,
it's just, it's so, yeah, the capitalism, the way that we can look at capitalism now through the eyes of this pandemic, it's kind of really, and it's the same thing with AIDS, I think. It was
mhm,
the same thing. It
yeah,
makes things so much clearer somehow.
yeah, yeah.
But
How are we on time?
we passed the 15 for
Oh,
sure.
okay. Okay, cool.
Thank you so much. That was really good.
Thanks, Lele. Thanks for having me
Of course.
participate.